A number of us are working on a self-guided pilgrimage for this holy site, First Presbyterian Church of Annapolis. Now, a pilgrimage is a particular kind of journey. It is a walk, it is history, but it is also one of a spiritual reflection, and most often involves some kind of holy site, like a pilgrimage walk at Iona or the Camino in northern Spain, or, well, they're all over the world, but even the example of the Chamaya Church in New Mexico with a famous Good Friday pilgrimage walk to that ancient church. A number of us who have taken the pilgrimage walk on the Iona thought that it would be good and be really engaging if we had our own walk here in our sacred site. And what with today's lesson from Acts about eating together, here is a rough draft of Stop 5 on the potential pilgrimage on our campus, namely Fellowship Hall. Stop 5, the McBee Fellowship Hall. Welcome to the family room of our campus. In this room, children play games, adults meet over coffee, the homeless are given lodging and winter relief, weddings are celebrated in a reception, and hugs are shared following a memorial service. We hold meetings and dinners, debate theology, and consider important issues of the day. And nearly every Sunday, children rush to donut hour. As in many of our homes, we hang out in the kitchen and the dining room. Named after the Reverend Bert E. McBee, pastor from 1944 to 1959, the congregation built this wing of the building under Reverend McBee's leadership. The room has gone through a number of remodelings, one significantly to take walls out and put in banks of windows to create better light. And in 2016, we completely refurbished the kitchen, the major final step in the near 20-year process of remodeling the entire campus. Once again, sweat equity, by the way, sweat equity is explained in an earlier stop. Once again, sweat equity volunteers rallied to do much of the work, this time under the guidance of facilities manager John Jameson and trustee Linda Hannafin Bonner. Right there, trustee Bonner. Yes, this is the family room and dining room of our church. Now, again, continuing with the potential pilgrimage, now take a moment and bring to mind a meal that changed your life, or a meal that celebrated your life, or a meal within a community of people that gave you a fuller life. Remember and give thanks. Well, that's a rough draft of Stop 5 on our future pilgrimage, a spiritual journey in a sacred site. In our household, time is basically marked by holiday meals. Joyfully adding new chairs for friends for a particular meal, and in our case, adding a new high chair for the newest in the next generation. And then, sadly, those times where a chair is taken away because someone is no longer with us. Like you, I imagine, we share stories and family traditions, and in our household, there is a great tradition of complaining about my Jell-O salad. Jell-O salad, very important historic link to my middle-income Midwest beginning. I'll tell you the whole story some other time. So I make the Jell-O salad, most complain, few eat it, and tradition is maintained. Now, from time to time, Allison and I do reminisce over the wonderful times at our dining room table, like the dinner with Parker Palmer, so filled with laughter and energy. and friends were from South Africa who were so gracious to eat our strange foods. We chuckle over the Thanksgiving when the young woman from China was there. Now, this woman just wandered into First and Franklin Street Presbyterian Church in Baltimore, saying that she had been baptized as a baby, as a Christian, had never been back to church in her life, and she was just wondering what Christians were all about. So she picked First and Franklin in Baltimore. If any of you know the history of that congregation, that in itself is quite remarkable. Well, she ended up at our Thanksgiving table. And it was marvelous because she went around and she took photographs of everything. You know, the living room and the dining room and the kitchen and the people and the tables and the turkey. Because as all of you know who have international friends, folks just go, "You eat those things?" I mean, those are scrawny and tough. You could never get through it. So, American-style turkey. So that's quite the international hit, is that they actually eat them. We mark time by these meals. The 32nd anniversary of our wedding, eating guinea pig in Peru. Local delicacy, by the way. Guinea pig, yeah. Not if the choir is not supporting that menu choice. We remember a magical night in Siena, Italy, just the two of us, wandering completely by accident into the ancient procession of First Communion, winding through the streets of Siena. It was just marvelous. We remember chances to host just our own growing family on our own porch, in the dining room of the manse or at the porch of our little cottage in Chincoteague. To this day, Allison explains that the best night of her entire life was not during the family trip to Italy that was so great, but the year before, when we had dinner in our own dining room porch, and we had our homemade Italian meal, and we handed out cards to the sons and family saying that Grandpa's inheritance would take us all to Italy to have some more meals together. Indeed, one of the best nights ever. Possibly like you, my mind swirls back to incredible hospitality given to us by others. Bob and Mary inviting us to their home for dinner and Christmas cookie baking. We did that. It was our first year of marriage in 1977, the first Thursday of December, and we went back to Bob and Mary's home for over 20 years. The first Thursday of December, the whole time we were in Western New York. Young Halsey at the time took his first steps in their house. Such hospitality. My mind wanders to Haitians serving bread and coffee. Now, that's a standard Haitian breakfast, but when you're there and working with folks, it becomes almost sacramental when the coffee, thick and sweet, the spoon could almost stand on it, and little pieces of bread are served, and there's a sense of toasting around the work site. My mind goes to all the various meals in family of Czechs, our Czech partners in Letterod, as they open their homes and their hearts. And just speaking of that, I'm reminded of just how incredibly fortunate I have been to receive such remarkable hospitality from you, from so many people, and people around the planet. I hope your mind is traveling to similar places of kindness and hospitality and meals together. See, today is all about meals. Meals that give life and meals that sustain life. Now, it's hardly dramatic on the surface, but what's fascinating is the amount of time that meals are talked about or as the backdrop in the New Testament. Jesus' teaching and parables. And then now in the book of Acts, talking about the rapid growth of this young church What does Acts say? Well, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and prayers. A nice touch, this phrase, breaking of bread, because it points to both dinner or lunch and the sacrament. But lest we overly spiritualize this line to the Lord's Supper alone, the next paragraph repeats the sentiment, stating that they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts. What a lovely phrase. Glad and generous hearts at mealtime. Too antiquated for our age? Our fast food culture is dangerous at two levels. Poor quality of food, if you make that your regular diet, and often poor quality of interaction. In fact, our household refers to the fast food restaurants as squat and gobbles. And I've had my fair share. I'm not above all that, and sometimes you are in a rush, but oh my gosh, I remember back the days working full-time in Lockport, New York, had an hour and 15-minute commute once a week to Colgate Rochester Divinity School. So I'd have my car there. This is well before computers. Remember when you still wrote letters and dictated letters and handed the tape to the office staff? Okay. So on my commute, I'd have my car arranged, and the fast food dinner was up there near the dash, and the seat had the notes and the tape recorder. Looking back on that was not the best way to drive across upstate New York. And even the phrase, eating on the run. No wonder we miss each other. And so many find that their lives are busy but lonely. Everywhere, but nowhere in particular. But as we're told in Acts, they broke bread at home with glad and generous hearts. But we live in the fast food lane. My eye caught a special about food from Kuwait, of all things. It was on television one night as I was flipping through some channels. I had no idea, but evidently American fast food is quite the rage in Kuwait. And now the nation is reporting, well, no surprise here, unfortunately, very high growing levels of obesity and its side effect of diabetes. Back in March, when I was in Haiti, I kind of made a connection with Maradona. He wanted some English lessons, and I needed a little help with Creole, so he would appear on my porch, and we would try this out. Now, he had this English language textbook with things like international marketing language. I'm going, oh, that's helpful. I'm out in farmland in Haiti. He had another one, and it showed a picture of a guy, huge guy, sitting in a Barco lounger with all kinds of food around and a television remote. That was kind of hard to explain in a land that has an area with no electricity. But the other thing that caught my eye he thought I was from a different planet, because I told him that in the States, it's possible to be poor and fat. And he went, what? What? No way to register. Because in a land of food shortage, the concept that you could have too much and the concept that you could be poor and fat, it didn't register at all. I was from a different planet. Well, nutrition is important, but it won't surprise you. I'm more concerned today about the social fabric in the health of relationships. And eating on the run rarely helps to keep us together. I've noticed, because I'm in and out of a lot of homes, and like you are, you have noticed the trends and the changes. In the last X number of years, I don't know how long, the real estate people can tell me, but the modern homes are to the big open floor plan. So you tend to have a kitchen going to a counter going into a family room. The old days, there was a kitchen and a dining room and a door in between. Now we design homes so that you can eat on the run, because a counter is, you can put it out quickly and people can sit and run. But for centuries on centuries, we have, as human beings, formed lives, celebrated lives, cared for each other, and formed families and communities by eating together, where food and conversation are both the essential elements of nourishment. Eating together. How many of you growing up were in a household where the Sunday meal was somewhat sacred and you did not intrude on that space or try to make other plans? Raise your hand. Oh, yeah. Okay, good number. I won't ask for a show of hands of how many do that now. But we do have all kinds of traditions that hold that together. Birthday dinners and anniversary events and holiday traditions. At our Bible study on Wednesday, one member spoke highly of continuing the tradition of dinner together every day, candlelight, cloth napkins, and you stayed at the table. It wasn't always pretty, but it happened. Now, I grew up in an extended family. We lived at great distance from the Hathaways and the Samuelsons, my mother's family. But I do remember the rare occasions of, what do I remember of family life? The Swedish smorgasbord on Christmas Eve. I like herring and limpa bread. Things that, well, this is telling, the generation below me won't touch. Before we went to Cuba, we had the appropriate orientation for international travel from our presbytery. And the woman, Deborah, who led that and had spent time in Japan on behalf of the church, said, now, the first rule of thumb when you're traveling overseas with the church is you eat everything they give you, even if you got to choke it down. And that's true. When folks serve you their best, you eat it, even if you don't know what it is and you don't like it. That's not the point. So when the menu in Cuba or Haiti changes from beans and rice to rice and beans, one still eats with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all the people. For receiving hospitality is just as important as offering it. But you know what? All this good talk about meals and wonderful memories of meals that have sustained you and sustained us, there is a point that's pretty obvious, is that you need to be at the table if you're going to be nourished. And you need to be at the table if you're going to make a contribution. Thou preparest a table, we read in Psalm 23, or in the NRSV with God, referencing God, you prepare a table before me. A place at the table. A place at the table of human decency and community. A place at a table of God's mercy. A place at a table of life. A place, not out on the fringe with scraps, but a place shoulder to shoulder. But, so often we just don't get it. That's not rocket science to have a place at the table, but at times we just don't get it. It's like when there's a church meeting and a bunch of adults are sitting around and saying, oh, we got to do the teenagers, we got to do something for the teenagers, and there's no teenager at the table. Or when people in the community debate about issue of immigrants without the voice of the desperate neighbor who lives a half mile away. Or members of Congress formulating health care policy without a woman at the table. That's just lunacy. We know better, because all have a right for a place at the table. For that's the good news, isn't it? You have a place at the table. Every child of God has a place at the table to be nourished in body and spirit and soul. And a place at the table to feed the neighbor. Oh, thanks be to God. A place at the table.